killed his father. He was unsure if his mother knew about it. But the ghost of his father had told him not to kill his mother. I shall speak daggers to her, but use none. This is the Queen's closet. It's the Queen's most private room in the castle. But I was not invited to this meeting. Hamlet walked in, but I would stay outside, listening by the door. I had to know what was going on. But Hamlet, of course, he walked straight in. This room has changed a bit since the tragedy. You see the beautiful arras over the wall. Used to belong to the Queen. But there would be arrases on every wall. The Queen had so many precious, beautiful arrases. They were hung up for decoration and also to keep warm in this room. There would be arrases behind or in front of the doors to keep out the cold. And also here in front of the window, a grand arras would hang from the ceiling. And Hamlet, he walked in and he attacked his mother. He attacked her with words. He was yelling at her. He was calling her anything from murderess to whore. He was using the term incest. But suddenly, it all became quiet in the room, and that's what got me nervous. So I looked through the doorway, and I saw that Hamlet had discovered Claudius. Claudius was hiding behind the arras, ready to kill Hamlet. It wasn't his mother who had called Hamlet up to this room. It was Claudius himself. But Hamlet was faster. He pulled out his sword. A rat! It is dead for a ducat. And he pulled back his sword, and the king fell to the floor with a smash.
Напади! Готово!
Only it wasn't the king. It was Polonius, and he was unarmed. He was dead and bleeding from a wound in his back. Hamlet had killed an innocent man. Hamlet had killed the father of Polonius. Hamlet's mother was screaming and crying with despair. But Hamlet saw me in the doorway and he said, "Horatio, thank God. Horatio, I need your help to hide the body of Polonius." This is when I started feeling sick. I mean, I had joined this plan to spy on the king. And now Hamlet had killed an innocent man and wanted me to help him hide the body. I decided to go with the loyalty that I had to Hamlet, and together we managed to drag the body of poor old Polonius out of the Queen's closet and into the next room, trying to hide him. Right away. But Claudius soon appeared and started questioning Hamlet. He wanted to know if Hamlet, by the way, could tell him where Polonius was. And Hamlet would do the trick that he had been doing for a while. He would play mad and come up with strange responses. So he said, "No, my good lord, I know it not, but I think that if you do not find him within the month, you should probably smell him whilst on the stairs to the Queen's lobby." Which indeed was true. That's how they eventually found him. Well, the body of Polonius or not, the king was afraid of Hamlet and he sent him away to England to get rid of him. And I had a terrible time. I was left alone here at the castle, alone with the villain king and the incestuous queen, and all the sycophant spies of Claudius creeping and crawling all over the castle, and the raving mad Ophelia. But one day I met someone outside the castle. I went for a walk outside the castle to get some fresh air. And that is when suddenly someone called my name from behind. I looked and I saw a stranger. How would he know my name? Then I realized that it was Hamlet. It was good old Hamlet. He wasn't wearing his proper clothes. He was in rags and all dirty in the face. But it was him all right. And I was happy to see him. And we decided to take a shortcut to rush back to the castle. So we went right through the graveyard of Elsinore. And it is on the graveyard of Elsinore that I really started to question the mental health of my good friend Hamlet. Hamlet would stop by a grave that the grave diggers were digging. And he would kneel down and he would pick up the bones of dead people who had been buried at the graveyard. He would start playing with them and make fun of them, which I thought very inappropriate and disturbing. Hamlet would even pick up a skull, like this one, and he would ask the grave diggers, "My good men, could you perhaps tell me who this fellow might be?" And the grave diggers were not shocked, like I was, because they're used to dealing with dead people. That's what they do. And they would try and answer the question. They would, like, examine the skull. They would say, "I don't know, my good lord, but it does smell a bit of rotten flesh, but not too badly. He must have been dead for many a year, so could have been probably the old Lord Mayor of Elsinore." Hamlet would come up with a different skull. Again, he would ask them, and they would try to find out who it was. For the third time, he picked up a skull. But this third time, the grave diggers didn't have to examine the skull closely. They could tell him from the distance, "Oh, that peculiar one, clearly that'll be Yorick." Poor old Yorick. Hamlet suddenly got very serious. "I knew him, Horatio. He was the jester at the castle when I was a little child. I cannot count the many times that he has played with me in the ballroom. I cannot count the many times that I've been riding his back up at the castle." So very respectfully, Hamlet would put the skull of old Yorick back to rest. Hamlet would start asking the grave diggers a more rational question. "Who is this grave for anyway?" he said. "Don't you know, my good lord? It's for Ophelia. It's her funeral today." Ophelia had killed herself. In her madness, she had drowned herself in the river outside the castle. Hamlet didn't know it because he'd been away to England. And the funeral procession was even arriving at this moment. A rather small one, because killing yourself is the worst and most shameful crime one can commit. Not very many people were attending. But the king was there though, and Hamlet, he joined the funeral procession to share his grief. The last time he saw Ophelia, he was sending her away, and now she was dead. This only to get into a fight. He was attacked by Laertes. Laertes, who was Ophelia's brother, the son of Polonius, who had come back from Paris to bury his father. And he learned that his sister had gone mad, and now he saw that his sister had killed herself. He was angry with Hamlet. He had a feeling that Hamlet was behind his father's death, and he also felt that Hamlet was responsible for Ophelia's suicide. They were having a fist fight, and it was actually the king who would separate the men. He would tell them, "This is certainly not a matter for men of your league to settle a dispute. Why don't we have a duel, my lords, up at the castle later this afternoon?" So it was decided that this is where Claudius would throw his very extravagant parties to impress everyone with his wealth and power. He would serve the most expensive food and delicious wine. He would have lots of entertainers, jugglers, jesters, actors. And whenever the king called a toast and rose his goblet, he'd let the gun shoot outside. Salutations. Hamlet was appalled by this tradition from the first beginning. Hamlet thought it embarrassing. Oh, why do people have to hear it miles away that the king of Denmark is drinking again? But such were the manners of Claudius. This is also where the duel would take place. And everybody at the castle had gathered here This was a joyful event. This kind of duel is not a deadly game. It's a sporting game for gentlemen. You do not fight with a deadly sword, you fight with a harmless rapier. It looks like a sword, but it doesn't have a deadly pointed end, and it doesn't have a sharpened blade. So the purpose of a duel is to poke marks in the chest of the opponent. It's called touche. And you count the touches. Normally, the first one to make 12 touches wins the duel. But in this case, Laertes, he was the fencing champion of Paris. I mean, Hamlet was good. He was the Prince of Denmark. He'd been fencing since he was 5 years old. But it was decided that Laertes had to make 12 touches to win, while Hamlet could win with making only 3. Hamlet's mother, in particular, was very happy and excited to see her son doing something that was suitable for the Prince of Denmark to do. Even I was quite excited. Normally I tend to believe that the pen is mightier than the sword, but I was quite eager to see how Hamlet would do in this match. The king signalized that the duel begin, and Laertes fiercely attacked Hamlet again and again. But every time, very elegantly, Hamlet would wave aside the attacks of Laertes, until rather soon Hamlet made a very elegant counterattack, and he made a beautiful clear touche right in the middle of Laertes' chest. And everybody was applauding with surprise. Especially Hamlet's mother was very happy that her son was leading the duel. Everybody was happy except the king. He looked a bit nervous, and he awkwardly grabbed a goblet of wine, and he walked over to offer it to Hamlet as a compliment for making the first touche. But Hamlet would push the king aside more or less, and he would say, "Thank your majesty, I shall drink when this duel is over." So the king put back the goblet. And Gertrude, the queen, she was in such a happy mood. And she knew that Claudius would always serve the best of wine. She thought this wine was too good to waste. So she happily took a large sip from the goblet. But she shouldn't have done that. She got all pale and she got the cramps very quickly. Apparently, the wine had been poisoned. She could barely speak, but she said, "I'm dying. I've been poisoned. This is a treason," and she fell to the floor. And the fear that we had known at the castles sort of recurred at this moment. Treason, treason, we heard from every corner, and people were looking for the guilty one. Hamlet was kneeling down beside his mother trying to help her, but he couldn't. She had been poisoned by the wine. This is when Laertes would surprise us all. He would jump up behind Hamlet and stab him in the back, which didn't make sense, because in a duel you don't get points for stabbing the opponent in the back. But Laertes did this nonetheless, and Hamlet would start bleeding from a small wound in his back, but he appeared to be poisoned as well. Something was wrong with Laertes' rapier. Hamlet got all pale, but he managed to flip the sword out of the hand of Laertes, pick it up and stab Laertes with his own sword. That turned out to be a deadly pointed sword. They had given Hamlet a harmless rapier, but Laertes had been fighting with a deadly poisoned sword. Laertes was dying too, and he decided to confess his sin, to be in a plot with the king to kill Hamlet. The king and Laertes had agreed to trick Hamlet into fighting this duel, and then give Hamlet a harmless rapier and give Laertes a deadly pointed sword soaked in venom. And as a second plan, the king had even prepared a goblet of poisoned wine in case Laertes wouldn't manage to stab Hamlet. Laertes passed away, Hamlet forgave him, and with all of his final strength, he managed to stab the king, and he forced the king to drink of his own poisoned wine. Finally, Hamlet had got revenge. The king was dead.
Рэпера с ядом. Расплавленная сталь по назначению!
But Hamlet didn't have long to go either. And he told us that now that he couldn't replace Claudius on the throne, he would send his voice to Prince Fortinbras as the next king of Denmark. And the rest, he said, is silence. When I heard these words, that's when I realized that it was all over. Hamlet, who was my everything, was dying before my eyes. And I wanted to die with him. So I grabbed the goblet of poisoned wine and put it to my mouth. But Hamlet stopped me and he said, "No, Horatio, please, don't kill yourself. Horatio, you have to live on and tell my yet unknown story to the world." And Hamlet passed away. This is when we all heard the noise of someone arriving at the castle. It was Prince Fortinbras with his army bursting through the gates of the castle and arriving in the ballroom. Fortinbras was hailed as the new king of Denmark. And he was the first one I told Hamlet's story to, and Fortinbras believed it right away. And his first orders as king of Denmark was that the body of Hamlet be carried out in honor.